having experienced long-term trauma actually can make you stronger. Thank you, Datsi. And I want to say thank you also to the organizing team for this wonderful conference. We so much appreciate being able to come together, and thank you to all of you. How many of you are feeling a little bit anxious or sad about going back to your lives after being in this space? Yeah, some of us do. How many are feeling pain at all of the things that we've talked about in terms of the ways that the animals are suffering and hurting, and the way that our fellow activists are hurting? So, yeah. Would you please do me a favor? Would you please stand up? I want you to really feel your feet connecting to the ground. And feel the energy of everybody around you and the love that is in this room and in the courtyard outside. I want you to feel your connection to all of those beings, all of those free beings all over the world who are working with us. We're not working just on their behalf, but they're working with us, and we're working with them, and we are serving them. I want you to feel that energy. Just bring that in. Take a deep breath. Shake it out. Have a seat. Thank you. Thank you. It was me. Welcome to the first installment of the Indra Lahiri Liberation Meditation Series, featuring some of our beloved rescued cows. Every animal at Indra Lahiri is a liberated being, so as you watch, know what you are seeing. Free, protected, autonomous cows, a rare and precious sight. Before you begin, find a place without distractions. Sit back, take this in with no expectation, be present, and see what you experience. Take a moment to check back in with yourself after just 2 minutes with the cows. We started by talking about what was in our hearts, about how we were feeling about the pain that we knew was happening in the world around us, about how we felt about leaving this kind of bubble that we're in. Check in with your heart and see how it's feeling now. Is anybody feeling a difference? Let me hear a word. to describe the difference? Anybody? One word. I hear calm over here. Anyone else? Sorry? Peace. The animals do that for us even when they're just on screen. So, I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here to this space where I'm studying how we humans need the animals and how they help us heal. I'm not advocating that we force them to help us heal, by the way, but what I'm observing is what they do naturally with us, when they build relationships with us naturally, when we just happen to just spend time with them, when they're free. It doesn't work when they're on a farm. They're too frightened. They're too closed out. They have to be to survive. But once they're free, it makes such a difference. So I grew up in a family where my mother is from the Netherlands and my father is from India. I was the first child born in the United States. My mother grew up in Nazi-occupied Netherlands, and my father grew up in India during the partition, which any of you who know Indian history was an extremely violent war. And obviously we all know what was happening in the Netherlands during Nazi occupation. My mother was 7 years old by the time she started helping to smuggle food into concentration camps. So my parents experienced trauma very early in their lives, both of them. I was born in the United States, in New York State, within months after it became legal for the first time to have an interracial marriage. So I was one of the first interracial people growing up in that community, and I experienced not only the trauma from my family, but extreme bullying. And I also experienced extreme bullying from my own big brother, so I had a lot of difficulty as a child. But we had a dog, and her name was Panda, and I didn't cry until I was 5 years old because Panda, before I needed anything, alerted my parents. If I was hungry, if I needed a diaper change, if I was about to crawl down the stairs, she was there for me. And that continued all of my life. The animals have just found me and helped me in so many ways. And what I've had the opportunity to observe since founding Indra Loka is that they do the same for everyone. So many humans come to the sanctuary, from little tiny ones to elders, and almost every single one is suffering. And I see the animals over and over and over again pick out someone that's special to them, that they feel a connection with, and go over and just offer them love in a way that we humans don't seem to really be able to do with each other, not quite as extremely and as purely. So I started studying this, and of course my background is in psychology, right? So I started looking at what's the science behind this? Is this true? Is this my dreamer nature? The poet in me wanting it to be so, or is this really happening? And so that's what I want to talk with you about today, because it turns out this is really happening, and we actually have a team of researchers working with the sanctuary now to study the phenomena of what happens when hurting humans get the opportunity to build relationships with free animals. So I want to talk about what is trauma, because we throw that word around pretty liberally, right? And a lot of times we say, oh, I was traumatized because there was, the lettuce was bad in my salad, right? So we're not talking about that kind of trauma. What we're talking about generally when we speak about trauma in the scientific sense of the word is an event that we experience that has lasting adverse effects. Okay, so that could be almost anything, and all of us have experienced trauma at some point in our lives, and all of us will experience trauma again. It doesn't always stay with us forever, right? We may be in a situation where perhaps we're in a car accident, and for a day or two or a month or two after that, we may experience some effects, and then we may heal from it, right? So some traumas don't last forever, but some do. And that's what we want to talk about, is the longer lasting, the deeper traumas, and what we can do to heal ourselves. And the reason that I want to talk with all of you about this today is all of you as animal rights activists are most likely experiencing trauma on a regular basis, because the witnessing of violence is traumatizing to those who witness it, especially those with hearts as sensitive as all of yours are. That's what brought you into this work to begin with. And if we don't pay attention to this and heal ourselves, we will not be strong enough to speak up for the ones that we so desperately need, right? So we have to save them to save ourselves, but we have to save ourselves to save them. We're connected. Our fates are connected. So there's lots of types of trauma that we might go through in our lives. Natural disasters, human-caused disasters. There's a couple of these that I want to point out in particular, okay? And that is the trauma of refugees and immigrants, the racial trauma, historical trauma. These are some things that I want you to keep in mind, because many times somebody has experienced, and perhaps you have too, past traumas, that when we are then rescuing animals and experiencing violence again, it's re-traumatizing our old wounds, okay? So that then makes our injury more complex and more difficult to heal. And it's important to understand that these things are layered. It is equally important to remember not to compare your trauma to someone else's. I have a very good friend who does a lot of work with the SAVE movement, and I once suggested that we go out to dinner and perhaps go find some music to listen to, and she said, I can't do that. I can't do that because I know the pigs are suffering, and I can't go and enjoy myself while that's happening, right? But so we can't compare, she wouldn't even want to look at her own healing, because she was saying, but they're going through so much worse. All I'm doing is witnessing what they're going through. They're the ones that are really suffering. But we can't do that. We can't compare pain, and I urge you not to. Because if you try to do that, what you're ending up doing is blocking your own healing. And if you block your own healing, again, you're cutting off your power. And you cannot cut off your power. The animals need you to have your power to speak for them. And again, we need them to have their power to help us, right? So we're interconnected, and we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of them. So just an important piece of this, too, to keep in mind is that historical trauma is real. Okay? So that generational trauma changes the DNA. And it changes the way that we handle stress. It changes the way that we handle violence because of generations of our families having experienced trauma. So, for example, in my case, my family in India that experienced the British occupation and then all of the suffering that resulted from that, that's generational trauma that affects me to this day, even though I didn't live through that, okay? Because it's impacted my brain. And it changes who I am from the time that I'm born. It doesn't mean that I have to suffer all of my life, but it means I need to understand it and understand how to take care of myself. Okay, and I also want to point out racial trauma, okay, because it's so easy for us to forget that there are those of us who are facing a lot more than we are, right? And it's important to keep this in mind because we need to be able to support each other in this work as well. And understand ourselves. So with all of that said, let's spend a little bit of time with the sheep.
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to just sit with no assignment, isn't it? How did that feel? Yeah? Sometimes it's good to just be present in the moment if you can do that. The animals really can help us do that. So I'm going to encourage you. How many of you have a sanctuary near you? Okay. How many don't know if you have a sanctuary near you? Okay. Go find out. Go find out. Seek out a sanctuary. Find some opportunities. Go help them. Volunteer. You're going to find that just being around these animals is going to start already to bring you back to yourself, to bring you back to your own power. And sometimes it's hard to just sit there. I have a hard time just sitting there and enjoying the animals and being present with them because I know how much work there's to be done. But I have to discipline myself to do it because I know it's a part of my own regimen for staying healthy. So we're going to talk about the brain a little bit. Okay? When we experience a deep trauma, especially those complex traumas that begin in childhood that are repeated chronic traumas, okay? Our brains actually change. And this is research that was done in the 90s by some researchers who meant well. It was actually kind of terrible, and they now look back and say they wish they hadn't done things the way that they did now that they understand what they did. But what they did was they took people who had been through traumas, who had volunteered, and they asked them to describe their trauma in a lot of detail. And then they created a story to tell back to them. And they studied their brains while they were retelling the story of their own trauma. And they were looking at the parts of the brains that lit up, and they were comparing those pieces of their brain with people who hadn't been through the trauma and how that worked. And then they started looking at brains just in general, without re-traumatizing people, just studying the parts of the brain that were active and not active between people who had been through chronic, long-term trauma and those who had not. And what they found were three really important things. Okay? The first one is the amygdala. This piece right here, that's our fight or flight. That's the piece of us that's the base piece of us that keeps us alive, okay? That's the piece that tells us, there's danger, I gotta do something now, okay? That's the part that tells you I gotta run, or I gotta hide, or I gotta fight this person off, right? So when we experience chronic, severe trauma, that part of the brain gets activated and it doesn't know how to stop. So people who have experienced chronic trauma, especially from childhood, are constantly on high alert. That part of the brain is always telling them there's danger and always telling them they need to either hide or fight. So can you imagine what that feels like? To feel like everything around you is a danger. Everyone is out to get you. There's harm everywhere. Coincidentally, that's also how prey animals feel, right? Normally, humans are predators. But going through chronic trauma actually makes our brains more like those of farm animals than of other humans. Because we become like prey animals in that way. Okay, so that's one piece of it that happens. But while that's happening, the hippocampus, which is responsible for our short-term memory, also gets all screwed up. And what it does is it doesn't distinguish well between short-term and long-term anymore. So that, for example, I may be here with you right now, and perhaps I get a scent of something or hear a sound that may remind me of that bullying I told you about in childhood, right? And it would immediately take my brain into a place where I feel like I'm experiencing that instance from my childhood at the same time that I'm here with you. So that's what we call flashbacks, and they're very real. And some people experience them bodily, some people experience them through sensations or actual visuals, almost like hallucinations or sounds. But this is a real thing that has been studied. And so what happens is our short-term and long-term memory are all mixed up, and our fight or flight instinct is on high alert. So you see how this is starting to really challenge us already, okay? And by the way, what's interesting to note with this too is that people who have experienced this kind of chronic severe trauma, if they don't work through that and they don't get the opportunity to heal from that, they're much more likely to develop Alzheimer's and other related dementias as they get older. Okay, because that part of the brain just isn't working right. It doesn't get better as we get older if we don't pay attention to it. Just like if you broke your knee, right, and you didn't go to therapy and you didn't do all the things you had to do to heal it, eventually that knee would stop working. Well, the brain's the same way. Okay. So, and there's a third piece of this, okay? And the third piece is in the prefrontal cortex. Okay, that's the part that's your personality. That's the part where you're making your decisions, where you're deciding what you're going to say, how you're going to interact, what your choices that you're going to make in your life, okay? And what happens with that prefrontal cortex at the same time is that it shrinks. So it makes it harder to regulate thoughts and emotions. And the reason that it shrinks is because that hippocampus and the amygdala are taking up more space because they think to keep you alive, they have to do what they have to do to keep you aware of the danger all the time. Okay? So you're so aware of the danger, and then you're not able to make the choices that you need to make. And so years after experiencing trauma, you may end up still feeling frightened, still feeling highly alert, and not knowing why. And as a result of that, what happens is that people who have experienced this kind of trauma, they can't always even recognize what their emotions are because it's the prefrontal cortex that tells you. Or they may not be able to find the words for the emotions that they're feeling. Okay, so it's impacting every part of your life now. At this point, it's impacting your executive function, it's impacting your subconscious behaviors, it's everything is happening with this trauma. But here's the good news. Here's the best news. There's a way to rewire that. There's a way to fix that, and it's not that hard. It's actually quite a joyous process. And I have to say that because of the animals, I've been able to do this, and I've seen countless other people be able to do this. And I'm going to tell you how right now, okay? Because I'm guessing that a lot of you are probably relating to some of the things that I've just described. Is that true? Yeah. So there's a way out. You're not stuck there. There's a way out. But you need the animals. Okay, so the effects of trauma, as you can imagine, are widespread, and these are just some examples. But often, when we think we just have an addiction problem or a substance abuse problem, or perhaps a problem with choosing the wrong partners in life over and over again, or choosing the wrong friends in life over and over again, or a lot of these kinds of things, the anxiety, irritability, quick to anger, these are all just effects when we don't deal with our trauma of how it might impact our personality. So to the world around us, we just kind of look like we're crazy or we're jerks. But in reality, we just are constantly trying to take care of ourselves, and we don't know how to do it, and our brain doesn't know how to do it. Okay. So we have to rewire, and that is partially where the animals come in. It's not entirely where the animals come in. You do need a therapist to get through this. You need someone safe that you can trust to talk to. But in addition to that, there are things that talking doesn't help with. Talking doesn't rewire your brain. Okay. The things that we just did, like meditation rewires your brain, breathing rewires your brain, other things like that. So we're going to talk more about that. But I want to just show you another quick video because I think it'll be easier than me explaining how exactly the animals help. And I think it's really just a slideshow, and you'll just get an opportunity to see the faces of the humans and non-humans. And I think that alone will help you get a sense of how this works. So.
We are in the midst of an unprecedented mental health crisis. Most of us experience some kind of painful, life-altering trauma. This could be divorce, abusive parents, death, COVID-19, a car crash, a hurricane, or another natural disaster. The point is that we all know suffering. However, we don't all always recover and move past it. This is where the animals of Indra Loka help. Through the rescue of abused and neglected farm animals, Indra Loka helps humans find hope and healing in the shared experience of trauma. Through the unconditional love of animals, we learn to see beyond our scars, Those that are grieving, lonely, or recovering from trauma form bonds with the animals we rescue. Through these connections, both the humans and the animals grow in their resilience, heal their wounds, and find joy and hope again. Early study results strongly indicate that our programming is even more effective than today's traditional animal-assisted therapy model. Indra Lahiri is poised to exponentially increase the numbers of people that our animals can help. We could reach hundreds of thousands of people a year by creating a replicable, clinically validated model for farm animal sanctuaries around the world to use, thereby spreading healing, hope, and compassion through our pained, troubled, frightening world.
Okay, so we're going to break this down, okay? Here it is. So, that problem with the amygdala, that fight or flight response that never stops, okay? Prey animals are able to regulate that. Okay? So, by spending time with them, we get the opportunity to see how they do that. It's through their breathing, through their do you know the motions of the cows and the sheep that you just watched? They're calming themselves by walking through the earth on the ground, the breathing slowly. These kinds of things actually make a difference to your autonomic nervous system. That's the part of you. That's the part of you that's getting all wound up, that's wanting to fight. Okay, so they help just bring that down. Just being in their presence, studies are showing, it regulates our heart rates. It slows our breathing. It helps us to just be able to take the time that we need to take that beat before we react, right? At the same time, that piece of the hippocampus, okay, that piece with the short-term memory problems, again, the deep breathing and the grounding help us know where we are in time and space. So part of our problem is that these days we're trying to move so fast. If your brain has an injury like this, it can't keep up with the movement. So we need to slow down, and the animals help us to do that. At the same time, okay, the animals, because they're prey animals, they have heightened senses of smell and of hearing. They can hear our heartbeat. They know how fast it's beating. They know how fast our blood is flowing. They can smell the hormones that we release as we have different emotions. And they're very tuned into us because they're prey animals and we're predators. So they want to pay careful attention to us. It's just their instinct to do so, right? To make sure that they're safe. But as a result of that, they respond to the emotion that we're feeling. Remember I said that it's hard sometimes when a lot of times, most people who've been through trauma have a hard time recognizing and speaking their emotions. But the animals recognize their emotions and respond accordingly, and that helps us realize what we're feeling. So they're kind of helping us see into our own hearts. And by being able to see and feel what we're seeing and feeling, we can start then, right? So therapy is not going to work if you don't know what you're feeling. So you need those pieces in between to get you there. The other thing that the animals do is that they role model resilience. Okay? We need hope, all of us. If you've never seen anyone come out of this kind of pain, how do you know you can? But the animals, I mean, every single one of them that you've seen in this video, that you saw in the video earlier today from the other sanctuary, at sanctuaries everywhere, these animals are going through trauma much more severe than a human being would ever live through. And yet, they're able to find joy again. They're able to trust again. They're able to find love again, and they're able to live in the moment again. So they're role models for us, and that gives us hope. And hope is just such an important part of healing. So the other piece is around love and touch. So the research is showing over and over and over again that we need love and touch to heal, that we need connection to heal. And yet, if you've experienced extreme trauma, you're afraid. Right? You're constantly on alert. You can't accept love, and you certainly can't accept touch. So This is a quote from one of the people who's well known for researching trauma. And what she talks about, her whole focus is the fact that having experienced long-term trauma actually can make you stronger. It can make you better. It can make you experience more. The trauma that you experience through witnessing all of the violence that you experience as you're trying to help the animals, it can work to your advantage. Because it can make you more resilient. But you can't do it without love. The roots of resilience are in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, self-possessed other. Okay. So I've been traumatized. I'm scared of people. And I know that I need love to heal. Who's going to be that person for me? Well, guess who I'm not afraid of? Right? Guess who we can open our hearts to, who we can allow to touch us, who we can allow to be present for us. We need someone to open the door. It's okay if they're not human. They're still opening that door to our hearts, opening it up and making it possible to heal. So the other piece is around touch, okay? Touch is so important, okay? But people who've been through physical violence and sexual violence, they're terrified of being touched by another human being. And yet, have you noticed in all of these photos you've seen so far, there's constant connection, there's constant touch between the humans and the animals. The animals love to be touched, and they're constantly asking for that. And by the way, we do have some animals who don't love to be touched and don't love the humans at all, and that's just fine too. They go off and do their own thing, and that helps us grow as well because we learn about boundaries, right? They're role models for this is not what I want, and that's okay. But this is a beautiful way for us to get the touch that we need in order to heal in a way that feels safe. So this is still preliminary data, and there's a lot more research that needs to be done, but these are the areas in which we are seeing real benefits of spending time with rescued farm animals. First of all, it normalizes the trauma experience itself, right? So I'm no longer thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the only one who's been through this terrible thing, and I have such shame, and I have such guilt. You know, why was it me? Why did I go through this? Or in the experience of someone who's witnessed the violence that animals face over and over again, there's a lot of guilt. Why am I still here? Why am I not the one being hurt that way? Why, right? This normalizes the trauma experience, and we realize trauma is a part of life. Okay. It doesn't have to always be as bad as it is, but it's a part of life, and it's okay, and it's not our shame that we've been through it. Okay. It provides a calming agent, which we've talked about. Reduces isolation. So this is a big one, because if you're constantly on high alert, what's going to finally let you calm down enough to even just be able to go to sleep? You're going to have to isolate yourself. You're going to have to get away from all those terrible humans who do all the terrible things, right? And yet we can't heal when we're isolated. It just makes us sicker and sicker and sicker. So the animals reduce our isolation, and then also the sanctuary becomes a community, okay, where the humans are less frightening too, because I know that I trust this cow, and this cow trusts this human. And I've seen this human with this cow over and over again, and I know that they're actually good to that cow. So I start to, right, it starts to open the doors, opening the doors little bits at a time. That's what we want to do. We want to open those doors. Brightens mood and affect. Okay, so people who have been deprived. There was a little girl who had been in her foster home that she was in for a couple of years. And in all of that time, they had never seen her smile. And they had never heard her laugh. She came to Indra, she came to our summer camp, and then she came back for another summer camp and another one, and she started coming to all kinds of events. And the foster parents told us she started smiling. She started laughing. Okay. And we hear these stories over and over and over again. Can you imagine a child who's never laughed? That's not right. It's not right, and it can't possibly help us be powerful in our lives, right? So it brightens mood and affect. It makes us feel better. It addresses grief and loss. So all that collective grief that we're feeling about the things that have happened in our own lives, the things that are happening in the world around us, it hurts. It hurts, doesn't it? And you're grieving that constantly. Of course you are, because you care. Okay? But we need to heal from that grief. We can't just carry it forever. Improve self-esteem and socialization, right? Because if I look into the eyes of someone that I love and respect, like Dow, my sheep buddy, right? And I look back, he looks back at me and he loves me. I see it in his eyes. He loves me. Okay. That helps me recognize that I'm worthy of love. So sometimes we need a little bit from somebody else, right? They're just giving us a little push. Yes, you are worthy of love, and I do love you. Okay. That makes a huge, huge difference to our self-esteem and our ability to go out into the world. Okay. It decreases overall anxiety, and it increases resilience. Okay, we get stronger. And I want to show you a little video that is an example of the animals role modeling resilience. Maybe. Here we go. Oh. Why is it doing this again? Okay. I'm not actually a technological wizard. I don't know if anybody's picked up on that yet. Oh, here it is. It's working. Thank you, though. That was really impressive, wasn't it? And then there's Mazzy, who lives in a state of constant bliss, moving around well while he searches for treats. But it wasn't always that way for him. When Mazzy came to us, he was in rough shape with a crushed spine. The doctor said he may not walk again. We had him fitted for a wheelchair, but he took one look at it and decided he was going to walk instead. He was determined and moved around gingerly, resting a lot, so he spent a lot of time with the chickens. I imagine he was dreaming of playing and exploring with other pigs someday. Today, Mazzy is living his dreams with his best friend, Chandra. It's adorable that he loves belly rubs, considering what he's been through. Chandra is a sweet boy who has overcome major challenges of his own. If you had seen him the night he arrived, you wouldn't believe that he's the same pig today. Mazzy and Chandra are living proof that when things seem hopeless, when we are at our darkest hour, there is always hope. There's always a chance for light, if only we're willing to open our hearts to love. And open our mouths to watermelon. Yep, Chandra and Mazzy, drinking buddies forever. So you can see how the animals give us hope. Every one of us has stories like that, the things that they've overcome. So I want to share with you that just spending time with the animals alone isn't going to do it. You know, that you need to do more than that. That's a piece of it, and I want to share with you the other pieces as well. The first thing is really to overcome trauma, and any of us as animal rights activists, we need to be in therapy. It's the bottom line. We need someone who has expertise to help us talk through the things that we've witnessed, the things that we've experienced, the things that we're thinking and feeling. Okay? It's hard to find a therapist, and you got to kiss a lot of frogs, but it's worthwhile. And in the meantime, while you're looking for someone, there's so many other things that you can do. And by the way, don't let finances be a barrier to therapy. I don't know how it works in every country, but my guess is that in many countries it's the same as in the US, that if you really, really, really need some help and you keep looking, the help's going to find you or you're going to find it. Somebody's going to be there for you and give you a sliding scale, give you a discount. I've found so many numerous professionals over the year who just simply care about the animals and find that part of the way they want to contribute is to support the people who are out there doing the direct work. So they're out there. Opening up to love and connection, we've talked about. This is, I should tell you who all these people are, shouldn't I? So over here we have Nandi and Penny Love talking about therapy because they gave each other a lot of good therapy. This is Wesley T. Monkey on Dow's back. So, and we find often that the animals don't care what species anybody is. They're friends with who they're friends with. Art and expression is a critical part of healing as well. Find the thing inside you that feels creative. Whatever that is. Is it stories? Is it making rock sculptures? Is it dance? Is it music? If you haven't found it, just try things. Just try different forms of art, different forms of expression. Notice the other people's art and expression that really moves you, and try some of that. You're going to need some of that because when we've been traumatized, we bottle too much up. And we need to find a way to let it out that's useful and productive. Physical activity is critical. This was a big piece I was missing for a really, really, really long time. I didn't get this part. I had to get back in my body. Okay? Again, that experience of trauma, it distances us from ourselves. And we need to reconnect mind, body, spirit, right? We can't just be a mind floating over here by itself, pretending we don't have a spirit or a body, right? So, and the other thing about physical activity is that it makes you feel good. You think the opposite, right? You're like, oh, it's gonna hurt. Don't do the physical activity that you really hate. Okay, if you really hate playing football, don't play football. If you really hate running, don't run. But keep trying. Maybe you like to dance. Maybe you like yoga. Maybe you like walking. Maybe you do love running. Maybe you do love sports and whatever it is, find that. And that also, as it turns out, has a scientific basis, because when we do that, when we really push our bodies, it releases endorphins, and those endorphins help us to feel better. It helps elevate our mood. So for those of us who have suffered with long-term depression, physical activity is hard to get started with, but once we do, it makes such a big difference to us. Okay. And plant-based foods, of course. Now, I know that probably most of the people here are vegan, but we're not always necessarily plant-based as well, right? The more processed the food is that we eat, the lower it brings us. I don't know why, but it impacts our emotions, and it makes us feel, I don't know how to describe it, but just lower. The plants make your body feel better, so eat them. And mindfulness and meditation, you're not going to get through any of this without mindfulness and meditation too. And it doesn't mean you have to sit still for an hour every day in a lotus pose and, do a bunch of breathing and never have a thought come through your mind. Okay? It could be taking a walk and just paying attention to each step as it hits the earth. Okay? It could be when you're washing the dishes, noticing how the water feels on your hands, how the soap feels, what the satisfaction is when the dish is cleaned and dried and put away. It can be anything that you do. It could be vacuuming, making beautiful straight lines that make you feel kind of aligned with things. It can be anything. I really strongly encourage you to look for a meditation class. There are millions of them online that are free. Look for mindfulness classes and books. There's so much research out there. So those are the pieces that can help us. I'm going to leave you with a parting story, another example of how the animals help. This is Penny, and after she died, I received this letter. Okay. Well, I received this letter, and we are out of time, but Penny, because she had lost so many calves, really helped this woman who lost her own child heal. And that was such a beautiful thing, and it was something I didn't even know that happened. Can I take one more minute? Okay. Well, there's not one more minute, but I have a sweet little video and a poem that if anybody wants to see it later, I'm around. Come find me. And if you have questions, just come find me.